There was a laminated card taped inside the visor of the van, and Rule 4 said, "If the transfer falls asleep, stop the vehicle, get out, and walk into open ground. Do not stay near the van. Wait for the horn." I read that at the pickup and laughed. Nobody laughed with me. My name is Wade Calloway. In October of that year, I was 46 years old, divorced twice, and driving for a two-van outfit called Loomis Secure Transport out of Kalispell, Montana. It is about as unglamorous as work gets. We hauled county inmates to dental appointments. We moved low-risk parolees between facilities. I carried a clipboard and a thermos and a lower back that complained on gravel roads, and the most dangerous thing that ever happened in my van was a man who would not stop singing the same verse of a country song for 200 miles. I want that on the record because of what people ask me now. They ask what I was, whether I was trained for it, whether I knew. I was a driver. I was a guy with a commercial license and a child support payment. That is the whole answer. The job came in on a Thursday. Loomis called me at home and his voice had a strange politeness in it, the tone he used with insurance adjusters. "One passenger," he said, "night run. Pick up at the yard at 9, delivery at a site north of the Yak, up near the line. Client provides escorts. Client pays triple, cash, and Wade, they asked for the driver with the cleanest record, and that is you." I asked him what agency. He said the paperwork said Department of Corrections. He said it in a way that told me he had looked at the paperwork for a long time. Triple pay was a truck loan payment and half of another. I said yes before he finished talking. The escorts were waiting at the yard when I pulled in. Two men, standing beside a dark sedan with the engine off, and I remember thinking they must have been freezing because it was 39 degrees, and neither one had his hands in his pockets. Big men, but not gym big. Built the way ranch hands and old loggers are built, weight in the back and the neck. The taller one handed me a folder and said his name was Dole. The other one never gave a name at all. They both had a smell on them that I took for wood smoke, like they had come straight from a burn pile. The folder had the route in it, not directions, a route, drawn in pen on a printed map, with 4 pullouts circled and everything else crossed out. Highway 93 to Highway 2, west, then the Yak River Road, then forest roads I had never driven. Somebody had written "no deviation" at the top and underlined it twice, and the underlining had gone through the paper. Then the van they had brought around back, our old Chevy with the cage in it, and the man sitting inside the cage. I want to be careful describing him because everything I thought that night turned out to be a wrong guess, and I would rather give you what I saw than what I decided. What I saw was a small old man, 70-something, in an orange jumpsuit with a gray cardigan over it, which broke about 6 regulations I knew of. White hair combed flat with water, reading glasses on a cord. He had the mild, foldable look of a retired pharmacist, and he was wrapped in more chain than I had ever seen on a human being. Not cuffed, wrapped. Loops of it across his chest and lap, heavy toe chain, the links dull and old, laid over him the way you would drape something over a load to keep it from shifting. I looked for the padlocks, and it took me a minute to find them, and when I did, I saw that half of them were not even closed. I mentioned that to Dole. I said, "Your hardware's loose back there." Dole looked at me for a second too long and said, "The chain is fine, read the card." The card was taped inside the visor. 5 rules. Follow the marked route only. Do not speak to the transfer. Do not stop except at the circled pullouts. Rule 4, the sleeping rule, the one I laughed at. And Rule 5, if animals appear on or near the road, slow down. Do not honk, do not stop, do not look at them longer than you have to. I asked what he was in for. It is not a question you are supposed to ask, and I asked it anyway, because of the cardigan, I think. Because he looked like somebody's granddad and they had him in enough chain to anchor a barge. The one with no name spoke for the first time then. He had a low voice with gravel at the bottom of it, and he said, "He has done things to our kind you don't have words for." I heard "our kind" and thought, law enforcement, cops. He has done things to cops. I put the man in the cage down as one of those quiet old monsters you read about, the kind that gets caught after 30 years, and I decided not to look at him in the mirror any more than I had to. That was my first wrong guess, and I built every other guess on top of it, so remember it. We rolled out at 9:20. Dole rode shotgun. The other one rode in back, on the bench outside the cage, with a steel thermos. And here is a detail I did not understand for a long time. Every 20-30 minutes, the whole drive, he would pour coffee into a paper cup, pass it through the slot, and watch the old man drink it. If the old man's head so much as tipped toward the window, The escort would reach through and grip his shoulder. Not rough, firm, and instant, like a man catching a glass before it goes off a table. All night they kept him awake. I thought it was some interrogation thing, softening him up. Wrong guess number 2. The old man himself said one thing in the first 100 miles. We were up past Whitefish, big, empty dark on both sides, and he leaned toward the mesh and said to me, gently, the way you would tell a stranger his headlight was out, "You should have asked for more money." Dole told him to be quiet. He was quiet. North of Olney, the country empties out for real. No houses, no lights, just the road running through timber with frost smoking off it in the low spots. Somewhere in there I noticed the movement in the tree line. My side, left side, maybe 40 yards into the timber, something keeping pace with us. I want to say a moose, and at first I did say a moose, in my head, except that we were doing 60, and it held station like it was tied to my mirror. Big through the shoulders, wrong through the arms. It stayed with us for 2 miles, never breaking into the open, and then the timber swallowed it, and I realized my hands hurt from the wheel. Dole had watched the whole thing without turning his head. He said, "Rule 5, you're doing fine." We made the turn onto Highway 2, and then, past midnight, the turn north toward the Yak, and the road went to 2 narrow lanes with the trees crowding in so close the headlights ran along them like walls. And on a long right-hand bend, with the river down below us on one side making its cold noise, my high beams came around and found something in the middle of the road. It was kneeling, on the center line, facing us, and it was kneeling. I took my foot off the gas, and Dole said, quiet and fast, "Slow. Do not stop. Do not honk." We came down to walking speed. The headlights climbed it. 7 feet of it, easy, even folded down onto one knee the way it was, and covered in dark hair with frost caught in the guard hairs, and its head was bowed so far its face was hidden, and its hands, were flat against the asphalt. I have hunted my whole life. There is no animal that does that. My mind was throwing words at it, and the only word that stuck was one I am going to use plainly from here on, because dressing it up would be dishonest. It was a werewolf. It was a werewolf kneeling on a state road at midnight with its palms on the ground. It did not look up at me as we crept past. But as the back of the van drew level with it, I watched in my mirror and I saw it lower itself further, down onto both knees, head to the road. And behind me, through the mesh, I heard the old man let out a long, tired breath, like a man at the start of a shift he has worked all his life. The first circled pullout was a chain-up area below a pass, a strip of gravel with a Forest Service outhouse and one dead sodium light. We rolled in at 1:10. Dole got out and walked the perimeter of the lot with his head tilted, not like a man looking, like a man listening, and the one in back passed the old man another cup of coffee and a sandwich in wax paper, and unlocked the slot, and the old man ate with the chains shifting on him and thanked him by name. He said, "Thank you, Marsh." So the nameless one had a name, and the old man knew it, and the way he said it was not the way a prisoner talks to a guard. It was the way you talk to a nephew. I got out to stretch and stand away from the van, which put me near Dole at the edge of the gravel, and because triple pay buys a certain amount of nerve, I asked him straight. I said, "That thing on the road, you saw what I saw. What was that?" Dole considered the timber for a while. Then he said, "That was one of ours." "One of yours?" "Paying respect. There will be more of them before we're done. And as long as they keep to the trees and keep their heads down, we have no problem." He turned and looked at me then, and the dead sodium light was behind him, and I will not swear to what I saw in his eyes because the light was bad. I will say that for 1 second the geometry of them was wrong, and my body understood it before I did, the way your foot finds the brake before you know why. "The ones with their heads up," he said. "Those are the problem. If you see one standing, you drive." I did the math slow, but I did it. The size of them both. The heat coming off Marsh in the back like a wood stove. The smell I had taken for smoke. "Our kind," he had said in the yard. "He has done things to our kind you don't have words for." Werewolves. I was driving through the Yak at 1 in the morning with 2 werewolves in my van, and they were transporting a small old man in a cardigan, and the chain on him was theirs, and the fear in that van was theirs too. It had taken me 180 miles to locate the fear because I had been looking for it in the wrong direction. It did not point in at the cage, it pointed out from it. Whatever he was, the werewolves were afraid of him. That is what I believe standing in that gravel lot, And I want you to hold that belief the way I held it, because it is wrong. And I carried it another 2 hours, and it nearly got me ended. We were 9 miles past the pullout when the route died. The road came down a grade into a flat where a creek crossed under it, and the headlights found the culvert and then found the tree. A green larch, 3 feet through, laid across both lanes. Not windfall. The butt end was chewed flat and pale, torn off, the way a stump looks when a machine has been at it, except there were no machine marks, and no machine could have gotten in there. Dole said one word, a name, I think, in a language that was mostly consonants, and Marsh came up against the mesh behind me, and the van filled with that wood stove heat. "Back us out," Dole said. "Now, same tracks." I had the van in reverse when the second tree came down behind us. I did not see it fall. I felt it, through the frame, through my seat, a single, deep impact, like a piling driven into the earth. And in the mirror, the road we had come in on was gone behind a wall of green. Then the woods stood up. I do not know how else to put it. On both sides of that flat, shapes I had taken for stumps and root wads unfolded in rows, and they were not keeping their heads down. 7, 8 of them, then more than I could hold in my head at once, tall out of the frost fog with the creek noise under everything, and they stood in the timber just past the reach of my lights with their heads up, and none of them moved. Waiting is worse than charging. Nobody tells you that. Charging is a thing happening. Waiting is a thing about to. One of them came forward alone. It stopped at the edge of the light, and it was gray through the muzzle, heavy, old, with a hide like bark, and it looked over the van the way a foreman looks over a load, and then it spoke. The voice was ruined, deep, mostly growl, but it was English, and it carried through the glass like the glass was not there. It said, "Let him sleep." Not let him go. I heard it wrong at first. My whole body heard it wrong. And then the words settled, and they would not settle. Let him sleep. Beside me, Dole had changed without my seeing the change arrive, the way dusk changes a room. His shoulders had gone wide against the door, and his face was longer than a face, and when he answered, his voice had dropped through the floor of what a human throat does. He said, "You know what wakes." "We are done carrying it," the gray one said. 70 years. Let it stand up and let it look at us, and whatever it does, it does. We were something before you people put it in a cardigan. And in the cage behind me, the old man laughed. Soft, real laughter, tired at the edges. He said, "Tell Ellery he still argues like his father." I want to stop here and tell you what I understood in that moment, sitting in the driver's seat with my hands at 10 and 2 like a student, because this is the hinge of the whole night. I understood nothing. But I resorted everything, fast, the way you resort a hand of cards. The chains half locked, because chains were never what held it. The coffee all night. Rule 4, the sleeping rule. Walk into open ground and wait for the horn. They were not keeping a prisoner awake to break him. They were keeping a man awake because of what got loose when he went under. The old man was not the thing the werewolves feared. The old man was the wall in front of it, and he had been the wall for 70 years, and half the creatures in these woods had come tonight to pay respect to the wall, and the other half had come to tear it down. He has done things to our kind you don't have words for. I had heard a confession. It had been a debt. The gray one, Ellery, looked past Dole then, past Marsh, and found me through the windshield. Me. The one warm, ordinary thing in the van, and its head tilted, and something in its expression organized itself into a question, and it said, "Why is there a man driving?" Dole said, "Because the route is warded for a man." "The route is broken," Ellery said, and turned away, and dropped to all fours, and the whole tree line came apart at once. They did not come at the van, that is what nobody believes. They went past it, over it. One of them touched down on the hood, and the frame dropped on its springs, and the windshield went white with frost webbing from the cold coming off its foot, and they poured around us the way a river pours around a rock, and they hit Dole's people, the kneelers, the guard, somewhere out in the dark behind us where my mirrors showed me nothing but shaking timber and frost fog with shapes cutting through it. Dole was out his door before I could speak, and he was not a man when he reached the ground. Marsh put his face to the mesh, and this close his breath was a furnace, and he said the last fully calm sentence anyone said that night. He said, "Drive the flat, creekside, past the culvert, there's a skid trail. Keep him talking. Whatever you hear behind you, keep him talking, and do not let him close his eyes." Then he was gone out the back doors, and the doors swung on the dark, and the noise arrived. All of it. The full weight of what was meeting what, out in that flat? Sound stacked on sound until it stopped being sound and became weather. The van shook with it standing still, and I looked in my mirror into the cage, and the old man was watching me with his reading glasses folded in his hand, and for the first time all night he looked his age. He looked like a man at the end of a very long shift, listening to the relief crew fight in the parking lot. "Wade," he said. He knew my name. Nobody had said my name. "Wade, I am going to be honest with you. I am so very tired." I put the van in gear. The skid trail was 2 ruts and a crown of frozen grass, running along the creek with the timber tight on both sides, and I drove it at a speed that was ruining the van and not caring. Behind us, the flat was a single continuous event. I cannot give you a picture of it because I never had one. I can give you what came through the metal and the glass. Impacts that arrived through the ground before they arrived through the air, so I felt each one in the seat rails a half second before I heard it. A sound like green timber failing, over and over, whole trees, and under that a layered roaring that would swell and then drop out all at once, one voice at a time, the way lights go out down a street. Every time a voice dropped out and did not come back, my stomach dropped out with it. "Talk," the old man said behind me. "Marsh told you to keep me talking. He is right. Ask me things, Wade." So I asked, and I drove, and this is what I got, in pieces, between the ruts and the noise. I am giving it to you the way it came to me. I asked him his name. He said he had given it away a long time ago, and that the people who handled him wrote Warden on the paperwork, and that the word was a joke he had stopped correcting. He said, "You have the idea by now that I am holding a door shut. Dole let you build that idea because it is a useful idea. It keeps drivers driving." I said, "Is it wrong?" "There is no door," he said. "Wade, look at the trail. There is no door, and there is nothing behind me, and I am not the wall." A branch took the mirror off my side of the van. The creek bent away and the ruts climbed. "Ask me what happens when I sleep," I asked. He was quiet long enough that I checked the mirror in a panic, but his eyes were open, on me. He said, "When I sleep, I stop remembering to be this." He lifted his hands as far as the chain allowed. A small gesture that took in the cardigan, the glasses on their cord, all of it, the whole mild old man. "This is not a shape that holds me in, it is a shape I hold. I have held it for 70 years, since the winter I did what I did to them, and holding it is work, and the work does not stop at night. I have not slept since Truman was president, not truly, not all the way down. There are men whose whole employment is to sit in a room and keep me at the surface." Marsh's family, 4 generations of that. Coffee and cards and the radio. You cannot know what a kindness it is. The ruts split around a boulder, and I chose wrong, and the undercarriage screamed, and we kept going. I said, "Did what to them? What did you do?" "I made them," he said. "Every one of them. The kneelers and the ones with their heads up, Dole and Marsh and old Ellery, and their parents, and the ones up and down this whole green country. There was a winner, and there was me, and I was not wearing this. And when it was over, there were hundreds of them, and they were what I had made them. And I looked at what I had done." His voice did not break. It did something worse. It went even. "So I sat down in the snow, and I built a man to be, and I put myself inside him, and I chained the outside of him so they would have something to see. The chains do not lock, Wade. They never locked. They are so the young ones can look at me and believe somebody is holding me. It is easier for them than the truth, which is that nothing is holding me. Nothing has ever held me but staying awake." I drove. The event behind us had begun to move. That was the worst development of the night so far, worse than the trees coming down, because I could track it in the frame of the van, the impacts swinging from dead behind us to behind and left, pacing us along the ridge on the far side of the creek. The fight was following the van. Or part of it was, and the rest was trying to stop the part that was, and the collisions of those two intentions came down the ridge in avalanche language, in the deep wooden failing of big timber, and in single heavy arrivals of weight on frozen ground that I felt in my teeth. "They are taking me north to a place they made ready," he said. "Under the mountain, past the line. A cold room, and around it 7 more rooms, and men like Marsh's family to sit shifts forever. Because I am done, Wade. 70 years, and the shape is heavy, and I cannot carry it much further, and everyone knows it. Dole's people want me down in that room before I drop it. Ellery's people want me to drop it here, among them, in the open. They lost the vote and came anyway. That is what is dying on that ridge right now, a vote. The trail dropped toward a wash, and my headlights found the crossing and found it occupied. One of them stood in the wash, head up. It was smaller than Ellery, younger, dark, wet to the shoulders from the creek, and it did not move to the side. And I remembered the rule, and I put my foot down. What happened then took perhaps 4 seconds, and I have it in perhaps 40 pieces. The van dropping into the wash, the shape coming not at the grill but at my door, at me, because Ellery had looked at me and asked, "Why is there a man driving?" And somebody had thought it through and understood that the fastest way to lay the warden down was to take away the thing keeping him talking. My window going white and then gone. Cold air and glass dust. A grip on the door frame that folded the steel like foil. The van tipping up on 2 wheels held there, my headlights raking up into the trees. And the old man said one word. It was not English, and I am not sure it was a word so much as a place a word would be. And it went through the van not as sound but as pressure, the way depth goes through you at the bottom of a pool. The grip let go. The van came down on 4 wheels so hard the airbag light came on, and in my one remaining mirror I saw the young one in the wash behind us, down on both knees in the water, head to the stones, the same posture as the first one on the highway, not paying respect. I understood the posture correctly now. I had it backwards on Highway 2. It is not what you do in front of a wall. It is what you do in front of a king. "I am so tired, Wade," the warden said, and his voice had moved, gotten deeper in the van, gotten wider, and I looked in the mirror and his eyes were closing. Not dramatically, the way a grandfather's eyes close after Thanksgiving, in stages, apologizing. I yelled at him. I am not proud of what I yelled. It was nonsense, my kids' names, the price of diesel, anything. And the world outside the van began to go wrong in a way I need you to believe, even though I cannot prove one detail of it. The noise on the ridge stopped, all of it, between one heartbeat and the next, an entire battle putting itself down like a congregation. The frost fog on the creek stopped moving. My headlights bent. The light left the housings, and it sagged, the way a rope sags, and the dark between the trees acquired a grain, a texture, like something enormous was being printed into the air one layer at a time, and it was taller than the ridge, and it was patient, and it was wearing the night loosely, the way he wore the cardigan. And the chains on him, the chains that did not lock, began to slide off his shoulders on their own weight, link by link, into the footwell, gentle as a tide going out. I did the only thing I had, Rule 4. I stopped the van in the middle of the wash and I got out, and I walked into open ground, into the creek, into water that took my breath, and I turned around and I looked at the van sitting crooked in my own bent headlights, and I screamed his fake name at it. I screamed, "Warden, you did not finish the story." The night held still for the length of 3 of my heartbeats. I counted them. They were the loudest thing left in the world. Then the texture went out of the dark. The headlights straightened like they were ashamed. Sound came back to the ridge in one ragged inhale, and inside the van, in the cage, the old man opened his eyes, and he looked at me standing in the creek and he said, "No, I suppose I did not." Up on the ridge, something enormous turned around and went the other way. I felt it's going the way you feel a train you cannot see. The event was breaking. Whatever was left of the vote was over. I stood in the water and could not make my legs move toward the van. He waited. He did not tell me it was safe. I have thought about that. He just waited, with his glasses folded in his hand, until the cold made the decision for me. We came out of the skid trail onto a real road a little before 4 in the morning, and Dole was standing in it. He was a man again, mostly. His coat was gone and his shirt was ruined, and he stood with the careful stillness of somebody counting his own ribs. And behind him, back down the dark, others were coming out of the timber in 1s and 2s, walking, some of them leaning on each other. I did a count without wanting to. 11 had gone into that flat with us, between the escorts and the guard I never saw. 6 came out of the trees. Nobody said the other names. There is a way people do not say names, and both sides of the mesh did it, and I drove through it like weather. Marsh was not one of the 6. The old man asked. He asked quietly, through the slot, and Dole stood at the broken window of my door and looked in past me and said, "The wash." He turned 3 of them at the wash so the van would get through. That was the whole report. The old man took his glasses off the cord over his head and folded them and held them in both hands, and he sat like that for the rest of the drive, and the chains stayed where they had fallen, in the footwell, and no one moved to put them back on him. There was no longer any point pretending in front of me. The site was 40 minutes north, up a drainage with a gate across it and men waiting at the gate who were not men. The road ended at a face of rock with a steel door in it, the kind of door you see at old mine adits, except this one was new, and the concrete around it was new, and the lights over it were burning at 4 in the morning at the end of a road that does not exist on anything. Inside was a corridor going down at a grade, and rooms off it, exactly as he had said. 7 rooms, and then the 8th, at the bottom, cold enough that my breath hung. They had built him a cell in the middle of it. Bars and a cot and a table, and the bars were the same theater the chains had been, and everyone knew it. What stopped me was not the cell. It was the chair outside it. A wooden chair, a good one, with a cushion tied on. A table beside it with a hot plate, and a coffee pot, and a deck of cards still in the cellophane, and a radio, and a shelf of paperbacks, and a second shelf, empty, with a strip of tape on it where somebody had written, in block letters, "Driver." I stood there reading that word for a long time. Dole came up beside me. He had washed and changed, and he moved like a man who had been in a rollover, and he said, "The route was never warded, Wade. There is no such thing as warding a route." He let that sit. What holds him is being seen. By somebody ordinary, somebody with no stake, somebody who looks at him and sees an old man in a cardigan and believes it. We can't do it. We know what he is. We knew before we could walk, and knowing leaks. He can feel it. Marsh's family sat with him for 4 generations, and even they had begun to know too much, and the shape was getting heavy, and so we started looking for a man. "The clean record," I said. "The clean record. No connection to us, no history in these woods, nothing in your blood or your past for this to catch on. 200 candidates." He read the files himself. Dole looked at the cage. "He picked you in March. March. The night run had come in on a Thursday in October, and I had thought I was lucky. I stood in that cold room, and the whole night reorganized itself behind me one more time, last time, all the way back to the beginning, and further back than the beginning. Triple pay, cash, and they asked for the driver with the cleanest record. Loomis's strange politeness on the phone, a man who had already been paid. The route with no deviation pressed through the paper, because a route is how you audition a driver. The card in the visor, rules written for a man they had not met yet, except they had. "You should have asked for more money," said at mile 40, said kindly, by somebody who had read my child support figures. "Keep him talking," Marsh said, going out the doors, handing me the job in front of me like a torch. And Ellery in the headlights, asking the only honest question anyone asked all night. "Why is there a man driving?" Because the man was the cargo. I had spent 7 hours believing I was hauling the warden north. He had been hauling me, even the wash. I stood there and made myself look at even the wash. Ellery's side had figured it out too. That is why the young one came at my door and not the grill. Take the driver, and the shape drops right there in the open among them, and they get their king back. Marsh had not died holding a road open for the van. He had died holding it open for me. The old man had come to the front of the cell, and he stood at the bars with his hands loose, and he looked smaller in there than he had in the cage, and he said, "I will not make it a trick, Wade. There is a truck upstairs, and Dole will drive you to Kalispell tonight, and the money is real, and it is yours either way. You can go home." He paused, and the pause had 70 years in it. "But no one has ever had to explain me to you. Do you understand what that is? 7 hours in a van, and I did not have to be him once. I only had to be a tired old man, because that is all you were able to see, right up until the creek. Even in the creek, you shouted at me like I was a man who owed you the end of a story. Nobody has spoken to me like that since before you were born. And when I start to know too much," I said, "when it leaks, then they will find another driver," he said, "and you will train him, the way Marsh would have trained you. It is a shift, Wade. That is all it has ever been. Shifts." I thought about my apartment in Kalispell with the parking lot light coming through the blinds. I thought about the loan on the truck and the 2 marriages and my kids, grown, in other states, who called on my birthday. I thought about Marsh passing the cup through the slot every 20 minutes, all night, 4 generations, and about a battle on a ridge that had put itself down like a congregation because one tired old thing had started to close its eyes. I did not decide anything noble. I want that written down too. I was cold and I was still shaking from the wash, and I did not weigh the fate of the green country in my hands. I looked at the empty shelf that said driver, and I thought plainly, the way you think about a job. I have already done the hardest night of it. Dole carried my duffel down from the truck himself. He set it by the chair and shook my hand, and his hand was hot as a stove. And he went up the corridor, and the steel door closed somewhere above us with a sound like a coin dropped in a well. The old man sat down on his cot. I could hear the radio would get one station, faint, out of Libby, playing overnight country. I broke the cellophane on the cards and gave them a shuffle to loosen them. Then I filled the pot at the tap in the corner, and I set it on the hot plate, and I stood there in the cold with my hands over the burner, watching the coil come up orange, waiting on the water.